Welcome to the Broken to Build podcast, a refuge for authenticity. Each episode, you'll be reminded that our scars are the foundation of our strengths. You will feel seen, known, and loved as you find beauty in the brokenness while you build the extraordinary life you were created to live. Welcome to episode 0 of the Broken to Build podcast. Whoop, whoop. My name is Lauryn Deloach. I get to be your host on this journey. It's been a long time coming. I am here with my longest friend, Melissa Perry.
Hi, everybody.
We have been friends for 36 years. And so normally on the Broken to Build podcast, we will be interviewing guests. I will be the host. I will have the guests. But today, Melissa's volunteered to help out, and she will be interviewing me so you guys can get to know me and who is leading you through the next season of Broken to Build. So thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Super pumped.
So excited.
Yeah.
It's going to be so good.
Yeah. So Melissa and I have been friends since we were 4 years old.
Yep.
Seen each other through every season. Why don't you kick us off?
I definitely will. No, I'm excited. I think this is going to be like a great time for you to dig deep and get your people to really learn your story. So how about we start off with that? How about you share a little bit about your background? Tell us your story and a bit about yourself.
That's a good place to start. Okay. My husband is Aaron. We have been married for 17 years. We met in college. And we have 3 beautiful children. My oldest son, Kingston, is 16 and just started driving like 3 weeks ago. It's terrifying and amazing all at the same time. I have Kanan, who is 13, and my daughter, Phoenix, is 10. And Kingston is a soccer player. Kingston's a football player. Kanan's a soccer player. Phoenix plays anything She's
a tough chick.
She is a tough chick.
I love her.
So I have a funny story about Phoenix.
Sure.
She was in basketball after school one day, and we were watching, and she didn't know we were watching. There was a whole bunch of kids, and a guy came up to us, one of the coaches, and he said, "Hey, which kid are you watching?" And I said, "The fiery blonde girl." And he goes, "Oh, I know exactly who you're talking about." He said, "Phoenix." And at that point, we turned to look at Phoenix, and Phoenix was pretending, she didn't actually do it, but she was pretending to kick a kid in the nuts who cut her in line.
No
and
way.
I was like,
That's my girl.
You don't let him pick.
That's my girl.
So she is fiery and feisty and sassy and kind and loving and all the things. So that is about the family. My husband runs a soccer-specific missions organization called Impact City. We are in 5 states in the U.S., and we just launched our first international location in Haiti. So the Lord has just been so faithful, and we're really just excited about all that's going on there. And what else about me? I own a small business. I've been into natural health for a long time, so I help people detox. I am currently writing a book, an author in progress. Never wanted to be an author, but never wanted to write a book. Never wanted to do any of that stuff, but that's happening. And I have a heart for women. I have a heart for empowering women to walk in their real, authentic self. Yeah. And that's the way that, I don't know, I think you can't be anyone else. You were created to be you. And I think a lot of times we're afraid of rejection and afraid of what people might think about us. And so it stops us from walking in our realness and our authority that God's given us. And so I've just constantly throughout my life been put in situations where I am helping women do this, whether it's one-on-one or in small groups or in even big group situations. And it's not ever something that I have looked for, but it's just always something that's happened, and I just have a passion for it. So
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so then where did the idea start with Broken to Build?
I would say, I wouldn't say the idea started a while ago, but I started to have, I don't know if I would call it a holy discontentment, but my husband was in church ministry. We were in church ministry for a long time, for 13 years. And I constantly felt like a square peg in a round hole. I constantly felt like I didn't fit. I felt like there was, in the nicest way to say this or the best way to say it, I felt like there was a lot of people in the Big C church, not like a specific church, but there's a lot of people that wanted to portray a certain image and didn't want people to know about flaws or even not flaws, just like, I don't want people to know that I watched this TV show.
Yeah.
Or I don't want, and so it just felt like there was a lot of pretend to me. And I always felt like I just didn't fit. So I think that's kind of where I felt a little bit like I was too worldly for the church, or too worldly for the church, but too religious for the world type vibe. And I didn't quite know where I fit. Yeah. And so I think that's where the root of Broken to Build was kind of formed. Like, there has to be a space where I can feel like I can be myself, and I can love Jesus, but I'm not religious in the slightest. And so a lot of times we do get a very religious vibe in churches. And I think that's probably why I felt like I didn't fit in that space. And so I love to create spaces where women feel like they don't have to be religious, that they can come and be accepted and loved, and they can love Jesus and also be real.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I mean, I would even push further, is like saying, knowing you in all different stages, I don't even think it started at 13 years ago. Like, I could see you digging in and feeling like that odd person out in high school.
A long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And where it was like you were set apart, you were created different. And now God is just giving you this like fire to run with, because you're seeing women differently. Yeah. You're seeing the way he sees them.
Yeah, that's probably true. And I've always had a little bit of an edgier, more, I don't want to say rebellious, but a more edgy side, where even in high school, if you told me not to do something, I was probably going to do it. So,
right.
So I have had that, and I've seen it now. I don't think I would always say it's a positive thing, but I've seen it serve me now in who I am and the role that God's called me to play, because I don't care what other people think. And so I think, and I'm probably going to do the opposite of what you expect from me in general. So I've seen the Lord use that rebellious side of me to get me to where he has called me.
Yeah. How did he take you to that broken place? Like, what was it that broke you enough to be like, I'm surrendering, whatever you want, I don't care anymore?
As far as what got me there in adulthood, or what the root is?
Maybe it's the root.
I think the root is, I grew up in a home where my dad is retired from the sheriff's office, and it was very much I tell you what to do and you do it home. And so I think that is the root of the rebellious nature of me, because after I got out of that situation, it's like this feeling of no one's going to tell me what to do ever again.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where the root of that comes from. Remind me the question again, because there is another answer.
What did God do in your life that caused like you to surrender?
Yeah. So the other answer I would say is, in adulthood, we went through some pretty traumatic church hurt, I would say. And I know that's kind of a buzzword and everyone's using it. And so, but I think that's where the Lord really broke me, and not in a bad way, because, in Genesis, Joseph talks about like what my brothers meant for evil, God used for good, and he used it to save many lives and to set Joseph up to save a whole nation. But what was done to him, the enemy, whether it's his brothers or the devil, like that was meant for harm. And so I think there was a lot of spiritual roots of what we went through. And I think the enemy tried to break me, and I would say us, but more me specifically, because he really hit broke the root of like who I was. He went to the core, he went to the jugular of like, and it worked for a while. I was like, I'm out, God. Like, I still love you. Don't ask me to do anything for you. Don't ask me to be in ministry. Don't ask me to talk to women. I don't like people. I don't like Christians. I don't like non-Christians. I don't like anyone. And so I think that's what really, and I'm going to use another buzzword, but like deconstructed my faith down to the core of like, God is like, it's your faith is not in people. It's not in the church. It's not in anything except for me. And is your faith in me?
Yeah.
Like, and so I think that is what brought my faith down to brass tack. Like, are you going to choose me or are you not? And so I think that is kind of where that brokenness came to a head. And then it was like, okay, I have to choose to heal, or I can choose to stay bitter and in this and just let it affect my entire life.
Yeah. I think too, in a way, to press in a little bit even more to that spot.
You're enjoying this too much?
I am loving this because I think that's the realness of being in a church where you must maybe not recognize that that's what's happening. So how can you tell people, like, maybe dig in a little bit into that space? Like, what was it that was the trigger? What happened that really showed up that was like, okay, I don't trust these people? And like, why? Well, press in a little.
It was betrayal was at the root of it. Nate Johnston does a great, he wrote this post that has stuck with me for several years. And it was, I'm not going to be able to quote it for you, like in quotes, but he's talking about character assassination, and he's talking about things that are coming from every direction, that there's so much confusion, you don't know actually what's happening. And it took me years, even after we left, to be able to figure out what happened, because there was so much confusion and so much chatter and so much like, and my husband was the same way. For the first couple weeks into the trauma, he didn't know he's like, I said, you're saying very quiet. And he's like, I don't know what to say because I still am not really sure what's happening. And
more so probably because that was your trigger, your wound.
Right.
Not necessarily his.
Yes. Well, and for anyone that knows Enneagram, I am a 6 wing 7. So like I have a huge life of the party side, and I have a huge like loyalty side to me. And so the worst thing that can happen to me is betrayal from friends.
Yeah.
And people that you thought were on your side. That people that when push comes to shove with lying and manipulation and stuff like that, and it blindsided me, like that to me, like the enemy knew exactly where to get me. Cause that for Aaron, he can push past most things and just keep going. He's going to keep going.
Yeah.
And so that was for me, the worst kind of attack that I could experience. And so,
so once you were out of it, first of all, how did you get out of it?
We had to move. physically get out of it.
Enough was enough. You brought it to Aaron and you're like, it's time to go.
Yeah, I knew the first like week and a half or so. I was like, we're going to have to, like, there was so much confusion that nothing was making sense. And, in the last few years, I would say, I wouldn't have said this before or noticed it before, but I have a prophetic leaning. And so sometimes I have dreams, sometimes I just know things, sometimes I hear things. And so I just knew after a week and a half, I was like, we're going to have to move. Yeah. Like, this isn't going to stop. There's something like very deep here. Yeah. And so I knew shortly after, for several months, Aaron is a glasses half full, Like we are not going to like this. We're just going to get over this and this is going to stop and it's going to be great. And they're not doing this on purpose. And they're, and it took him several months. After several months of like living in it and constantly like new things happening, after several months, he's like, okay, I think this is happening on purpose. And I was like, yeah. So we lived in it for 9 months and it was, it felt like 9 months of hell. It was just never ending. It was just constantly something. And one of my favorite reality shows is Big Brother. Okay. And it's been on for 26 years. Like it's like it's been on for a while.
Long time running.
And the whole premise of, have you ever seen Big Brother?
No.
Okay. So the whole premise is they put all these people in a house and they all become friends and live together, but then they form alliances and have to choose who gets voted out every week.
Ugh.
And so the whole premise of the show, there's some people that lie and sneaky and manipulative. And then there's some people who stay true to their word. And like, you have to play a social game and you have physical competition. Right. So, but at the end of the day, it's a show about like, are you going to betray your best friend to win $750,000? Yeah. Your best friend in the house or whatever. And so I love the show. I've been watching it for probably like 16 years. And in this season of our life, I felt like I couldn't watch Big Brother because I was living in it. I was living in this like weird like space and manipulation and like lies. And like, it was just very weird. And thankfully I can watch Big Brother now because I've healed and I've moved on. And I was like, don't take away my favorite show. But yeah, so it was 9 months of like trying to figure out what was happening.
Okay, so how did you heal from this? You move and then what? Like you're in trauma.
Yeah. So we move and then I get the space to finally feel. Like I was feeling during that, but it was like, it's like you have to hold it together. I have to like hold it together and survive. My kids are here. My husband's here. Like we are at the church with these people. We can't let people know what's going on because that's not like, we were not here. We were not brought to like tear down the church. We're here to build it up. So I'm going through this pain with very few people knowing about what we're actually experiencing. And so when we moved, when we finally like got to our home in another state, it was like, oh my gosh, now I can grieve. I've held it together for 9 months. I was going to two counselors at the time when we were going through all of this. So I continued going to counseling, but then I had several months of just grieving. Like every time when we went into our new church, every time we stepped foot in the church, I would cry. And I would cry. And I remember the first time I didn't cry. I made it through a whole church service without crying. And so I told Aaron as we were leaving, I was like, I didn't cry at all. That was amazing. Yeah. But I took several months to have to grieve and be sad, and then continued in therapy for a year, walking through forgiveness and letting go of bitterness and letting go of what people thought about me, because I was in a space where a lot of people chose to misunderstand what was happening. Like they'd hear a rumor and then they wouldn't want to talk to me about it and they'd assume the rumor was true. And like, so I had to let go of all the people that didn't want to understand or didn't want to even have a conversation. Like I had so much emotion towards all people involved and people not involved. Yeah. And so I had to process through all of that. And it took a long time. I did some anger therapy, which was fun. Like, it's not anything super complicated. It was, my counselor brought a big pillow and a bat, and he's like, pretend this is one of the people or something. And he goes, I want every time you hit this pillow with the bat, like I want you to verbalize what's in you, because that is going to release all of these things. Right. So there's a lot of crying, a lot of tears, a lot of cursing, a lot of anger, but yeah, through all of the therapy and moved on and learned all the lessons. And there was a lot of lessons to learn. And I think the Lord really exposed a lot in me that I thought was new. that I'm thankful that we went through what we went through, because I started struggling with shame big time after that. And I thought it was just shame that people wanted me to feel. And then the Lord showed me, like, no, you've been operating out of shame your entire life.
Wow.
You just didn't know it.
Right.
I've seen it, but you needed to see it.
Right.
And until we see it, we can't deal with it. So that brought up a lot of things. And so I'm thankful. The Lord did so much through it.
Yeah.
And so much healing. And so, yeah.
You know, I think too, something that you just said is like you had to feel for the first time once you were set apart from it, and feeling, I mean, knowing how you grew up and kind of expressing some of it where you cannot feel. You were supposed to be a certain way. You go into the church world, you're supposed to be a certain way. And now you have the ability and freedom to feel. That's a lot.
Yeah.
That in and of itself is sometimes traumatic.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're learning, like, oh, my body is keeping hold of these hurts, these pains, these wounds, and I need to release them. The Lord wants me to sever this.
Right.
So how long was that process for you?
The releasing process?
The releasing.
I mean, I think I'm still in it.
Yeah.
I don't know if we ever arrive, like, oh, I'm released and I'm done. And I've seen ways that I've released and even grown through some of this is a backwards answer to your question, but I realized through a situation recently that I was like, oh, I'm not fully healed because it reminded me too much of this situation with church hurt. And it tugged on a little, like a little thorn that was still there. Yeah. And it's like, I think that was the Lord's way of saying, like, you're healed, but there's still a little something there. Like, you still have to keep releasing. You still have to keep working on that. And so I think we're all a work in progress. And I think that is even the idea of behind Broken to Build is that these broken pieces, like, they don't just lay on the floor. You get to put them back together. Like, God puts them back together. And those become the beautiful pieces of us being built into the image of God, but then him equipping us. Those pieces, like the piece of me that was church hurt, like, that has become part of my story, and it grew me so much. And those are the pieces that we don't like to talk about, but we have to continue to heal and release and work through them, because there's something so beautiful on the other side.
Right. And I think too, for your situation and your story, is that the beauty of this brokenness was that God really was giving you all the gifts that you already have in you, all the words, the dreams, the ways out a little bit. And you are one who has great discernment. If that's something I could label you as, you are a discerner. That is like a gifting you have. And sometimes it feels crazy in the moment to say it, but like, God showed up in every single way. And I think sometimes people get stuck in it. And then if we can rise a little bit above it, you can see God giving you the way out, the door you need to come out and to walk it out. Or if not, it's like, just come to him. Surrender it to him. So what is like the one thing that if you could go back and that Lauryn years ago, what she needed the most, what is it that like you wish you maybe would have done, or you could see then? Like, what was your hope? What was that one place of hope that you found that was like, I can get through this. I'm not going to stick here forever.
Actually, the hardest part in the midst of it was kind of the lack of hope that I felt, because being in the church hurt world, like being church hurt, people don't talk about it. It's because we don't know how to talk about it. We don't want to seem like we're talking bad about the church, but like, we don't know how to be honest about it. So it's not a subject that's discussed much. So I didn't have something to like look at, or someone to look at and be like, I'm going to get through this, because I felt so alone in that space of like, no one has ever, this is what I thought, that no one has ever gone through this to the depths that I have experienced this. Like, I thought I was alone on a deserted island. Yeah. Now, in that, I will say, when we feel like we're in those hopeless moments, God always provides a time to come up and take a breath, a time to shelter you. And there's a book called Hind's Feet on High Places. And in this book, it's a great book. It's an allegory book, and the author personifies the main characters. Her name is Much Afraid. And so anyway, in this book, there's a part where Much Afraid is with her companions, and they're traveling through this forest, and it's raining and it's storming and it's lightning, and it's a horrible storm. And they come upon this little shack, and the shack has a fire going. It has fresh bread made. It has water. And they go into this shack and they rest, and they eat and they drink and they sleep by the fire. They warm themselves. The storm gives up after a day. They go out and they get more firewood, and they come back because the storm starts again. And so anyway, it was such a beautiful picture about how God, like, even in the storm, there will be a space that God provides for you to have that safe place, that hope to rest. Like, you're not just drowning continuously. If we look for those spaces, they're there. And there's a story that I refer back to often. And we were right in the midst of our storm that people didn't know we were going through. And I still had to go to church sometimes. Sometimes I would make excuses. My kid was sick. We had basketball. I wasn't lying. Yeah. But the kids, the second they had a runny nose, I'm like, sorry, we're home. Like, see ya. We're not coming. And so there was one week that I was there, and we were just in the midst of it. And I go to sit down in our seats, and my husband is sitting to my left, and my good friend comes and she sits down on my right side. And then our other good friend comes in a little bit later, and she sits in front of me. And so it was, I felt like the Lord was like, I've got you surrounded on all sides by these safe people who didn't know what was going on, but they were my people, and they were safe. And I felt so surrounded in such a vulnerable place. And so I think the Lord, even in the midst of those like hopeless times, will always give us that. But we have to look for it. We have to expect it.
So now that you are on this side, you've taken action. First of all, I think that's a big thing, because I think so many people can just live in it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, we know people who've just been like, nope, church, nope,
Bye.
I've been hurt. I'm never going to show my face again. Do I believe in God? Yes. Do I love God? Yes. But.
And I get it. I've been through it. I get it. Like, I don't blame you, because there are times, I think if the Lord, I was in a situation, if my husband was at that point willing to say, hey, we're not going back to church, I'd be like, cool.
Out. Bye.
Okay, cool. Like, I don't need to go to church. But that's just my personality. I knew my husband was not going to do that.
Right.
We were going to be involved in church. We were going to go back. And so I'm like, well, crap. Like, I've got to heal, and I've got to heal for me, but I've got to heal for my kids, because I cannot let my kids think, oh, the church did this and now we don't go to church, because they need to be in community. And when I say church, I mean big C, not like a church, but like, I can't let this affect their spiritual walk either.
Right. And then, okay, so let's kind of dig into that, because you said you forgave and you did not hold on to bitterness. But I think that's the root of what many people can do. Because they're not taking action to say, I need to seek out my heart and my wounds and this situation here, and I need help and I need healing. But they need to take an action step. And God meets them there, right? He always directs the path and can bring resources, but you have to move. So what was it that really allowed you to move in a space to seek help? And then how did that process look to forgive?
Those are good questions. I think the seeking help has always been something that I am very motivated with growing in every situation, learning about myself, getting better, going deeper. And so I've been in and out of counseling my entire life. My parents got divorced when I was young, and immediately my mom had us in counseling. So I am a huge proponent of emotional health, going to counseling, having people call out your blind spots, all of those things. So it was something that I was doing all the way through our church hurt and then continued afterwards. And I did hear a staggering statistic that only 1% of the world does self-care, which counseling would fall under. And I often say, I feel like those of us that go to counseling are in to deal with the people who refuse to go to counseling.
Right.
So
I see that.
I'm like, I have to take this as a learning experience. I have to forgive and not get bitter. And also I want to learn about myself because I don't want to go through this again. So God, teach me everything you need me to learn because I don't want to miss it and then have to learn it again later.
Yep.
And so I think those two things. And then what was the second part of your question?
So what was the process to forgive and not hold that bitterness?
Yes. I think I did a therapy called EMDR, which is a way to release trauma in the body. And I think forgiveness was and still is a daily choice.
Yeah.
So it wasn't, maybe some people have the experience of, so this happened, I just forgave them and I just let it go. And the Lord, I just don't even think about it anymore. Yeah. That's great. That's not me. I had to continue to do the therapy, to let it go, to choose to walk in forgiveness. And it's still a daily choice. And there were days that it was hard. Those days I tried to put into practice things that I had heard, like I would pray for the people that I was really bitter towards and genuinely pray, not just like, okay, God bless them, but as I would genuinely pray for them and that the Lord would get a hold of their heart, that he would surround them with people that point them to him, that he would use them to help heal people, that he would, as I would genuinely pray for them, my bitterness would dissipate.
Wow.
And I was able to walk in that a little bit more. But I mean, I don't know how people get through stuff without therapy. But I think it's a daily choice. And then it gets easier and easier. The more that you've released it, the more that you walk in it, it gets easier and easier to do.
Right. Now you're walking out of freedom.
Right.
You know, there's joy and peace that he promises.
Right. Yep.
In exchange.
Yeah.
That's so good. Okay. So now Broken to Build. Why start now?
I kind of feel, if we're being honest, that God didn't really give me a choice. It was very much, God just has lined up everything. I'm amazed at how he did it. And part of it was our relationship. Yeah. And I had the name Broken to Build for a year, and I had the Instagram handle, I had the domain name, I had everything. And Aaron would come home and be like, what are you doing with Broken to Build? I'm like, nothing. I don't know. I'm just sitting on it. And so the Lord used our friendship this summer. Yeah. You called me and you were like, hey, I have this whole thing, this whole business plan, and I don't have a name, and I think it's Broken to Build. And so the week before that, the Lord gave me a dream.
Yes. I was hoping you're going to share this one.
Yeah. And I didn't know what it meant at first. I had to pray into it. But in my dream, I was on this huge pink inner tube, and I was on a river. And the tube was so filled with air that I couldn't touch the water. My feet weren't touching. My hand wasn't touching. Like, I was just chilling on this side of the river. So the river was dammed off. Yeah. So the water wasn't moving. It was just sitting there. And I was on this tube in the middle of it. And as I looked at the bank, the river started getting higher and higher, and the water was rising, and I was just watching it rise. And then it got so full on the side of the river that I was on that the dam broke, and the water started rushing to the other side of the river.
Right. And
I'm on this tube, and I just get carried to the other side, and I couldn't direct it. I couldn't touch the water. Yeah. I wasn't scared. I was just like, okay, we'll see where we're going.
Yeah.
And so I woke up and I really prayed into that dream and really pressed into it. And the Lord gave me a scripture, and I think it's in Isaiah, but it talks about a broad river where no ship with oars can go. And the basis of that scripture is there's a ship on this river that it has oars, but it doesn't need to use them. It doesn't need to propel itself. Right. It doesn't need to direct itself. This river is the Lord. It just takes you. It's a place of favor. And so I felt like the Lord was saying, hey, it's about to like you've been in this holding pattern. You've been growing and learning, and I'm going to take you to where I want you to go. And you're not going to strive, and you're not going to direct it, and it's just going to happen. And so I was afraid to write that in my journal because I'm like, what if I'm wrong?
Right.
Which no one's going to read my journal, but it's like, I don't want to write this because what if it's not the case?
Yeah.
But within a few weeks, you had called me and you were like, hey, I really feel like this is it. And the Lord's told me to coach you in this. And I'm like, okay. And I'm doing, and he knows like everything I'm doing is so uncomfortable for me that I had him show me like 25 different ways. Like, are you sure, God? Are you sure this is what it's supposed to be? And the Lord has just surrounded me with people and direction. And so it's
time to start.
It's time. So we're here, episode 0.
Yay! I love it. Okay, so let's kind of do some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
You ready?
They're fun.
All right. What is your favorite go-to lazy dinner? Do you even cook?
No.
Okay, there you go.
I know.
I was like, wait a minute.
Every meal is a go-to lazy dinner.
It's my kind of meals.
Yeah. A big staple in our house has been the Costco street tacos.
Oh.
We did those like twice a week. And my middle son, Kanan, recently was like, Mom, can you please not buy these anymore? We have been eating these for like 4 years.
Oh,
and I was like, okay, so I have to come up with something new to buy there. But yes.
Another Costco find.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
I need Costco, if you're listening, please come out with some more pre-made meals that are healthy. So.
Okay, what's been your favorite age so far?
I would say 21.
Okay, why?
Not because you're able to drink then, but.
Sure.
I think the whole college season, like 18 to 22, is such a sweet season because you're free to make your own decisions and live your own life, but you're not financially like dependent on yourself. So I felt like this college age is like the best of both worlds. Like I do what I want and then I call my parents for money.
Yep.
So I think that would be my favorite. And I had my friends and Aaron was in my life. We were dating. We weren't married, but it was just such a sweet like season of not a lot of responsibility, but all the freedom.
Yeah. You kind of figure out who you are a little bit more outside of like the walls of your home.
Yes.
When you're young.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. What is one of your nicknames?
Oh, okay. So this is funny. I never really had a lot of nicknames, but
no, you didn't.
No. But when I was in college, I was talking to a guy and he was, we were talking about Snoop Dogg. Snoop Dogg got brought up. And I was like, Snoop Dogg's language is so dumb. And he's like, you don't like it? He's like, I'm going to call you Lanizzle. And I was like, that's so dumb. So somehow he started calling me that and it got like, it spread like wildfire in this group and it kept getting shortened. So for years, people called me Niz. I don't know. It was so.
I have never heard that story.
So that was on my, like, we had basketball jerseys for, what are they called in college? Not like
intramurals?
Intramurals.
Yeah.
Niz was on every basketball jersey. Like that was, yeah. It wasn't my favorite nickname, but it was one of the longest ones.
What's your degree in college?
Communications.
And then what's the best non-curse word, one word insult?
This is a great question. Wait, do you have one?
No, I do not.
You don't?
No. What is yours?
Okay. Mine has a story behind it because I need to justify why it's my favorite one. Wait, what is it? One word.
Best non-curse word, one word insult.
Yes. Okay. So Aaron was into Ted Lasso.
Okay.
With all the British
Such a good
people.
show.
It was.
Yeah.
And
is it still running?
I don't know. I would catch bits and pieces of I didn't ever sit down and watch like whole seasons.
Yeah.
But this one word kept coming up in that show, and I thought it was hilarious. And I don't know if I actually fully knew what it meant. So, but they would call each other wankers. Oh my God. And so I thought it was hilarious. And it didn't have the context. Like the American version of a wanker, I would never say because it's like crude and doesn't sound good. But that's a word internally I use with my husband all the time. And so it's not a serious word, but if he comes
it's
an
like, insult, but not.
It's an insult, but I'm not like super mad if he's like, oh, this happened. I'm like, he's a wanker.
You wanker.
Yeah.
Okay, I like it.
So, but I think
good.
if I knew what it had meant, it wouldn't come up as much, but because I don't have the context for it, I just think it's a funny word.
I love it.
So,
okay. So you talked about back a little bit ago about your book that you're starting off writing. Tell me a little bit about what this book is.
It's actually about what we talked about today. It's about healing and dealing with church hurt. And it doesn't fully have a name yet. I think I know the name, but I don't actually know how that works. So I don't want to say the name. If it's like a copyright or taken by someone, I am brand new in this situation. So, but yeah, it's not a bitterness memoir. It's not a tell-all, although there are salacious stories in there, but every story has a lesson.
Yeah.
And so I am in the editing process, getting done with the editing process. And like I said, God, I did not want to write it. And so we'll see what the Lord does with it. I'm just being obedient. And there's part of me that feels like if God chooses, if he's like, great, you did it, you were obedient, and it just sits on my computer. Great. I'm happy with that. If it was part of my healing process, and I just needed to get it there, then that's what it is. But we'll see what happens.
Can't wait.
Yeah.
Okay. And then final question.
Okay.
What are your hopes with this community, and what is like the big vision you have for them?
Big vision for Broken to Build. I would love to create for this to be a safe space for women that love Jesus, but that also live in a real world. So would love to create a community where people are free to do life together, to grow together, to heal together, to pray together, but also not feel like they have to have a front of like the Christianity front of like, well, I can't say this and I can't do this. And of course the Lord calls us higher. Like we are to be holy like Christ is holy, and we are to strive to that. But then there's also some real things that people deal with where it's like, oh, this is real life and I need a safe space to have that. So big vision would be masterminds, possibly conferences, possibly retreats. I don't know. I'm just kind of letting the Lord.
You heard it here, folks. Big retreats. Here we come. Coming up. Yeah. So, it's so good.
Yeah. So I so appreciate you being here, and
it was fun.
Just chatting and can't wait for our episode where I get to interview you.
Can't wait.
Learn more about your story.
I love it.
It's coming up. So
stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Thought I had no more questions, but I actually have one more.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, who is this for? Tell me the person out there that's listening and like, I need this. And who is that person?
For Broken to Build.
For Broken to Build.
Anyone broken? And there are so many ways, so many things that goes into that because we're all broken. So we are going to talk about postpartum. We're going to talk about anxiety and depression. We were going to talk about people that have been shunned for their beliefs. I want to say religious beliefs, but people that have drastically had their life changed for taking a stand. We're going to talk about divorce. We're going to talk about shame. We're going to talk, the list goes on. I think we all have such broken pieces in our lives. And I think that the story isn't over until it's redeemed.
Right.
And that's the build part of Broken to Build. We have to talk about these pieces because that's the foundation, and God is going to build something beautiful. And so this is for all the people that have ever felt. We're going to talk about, I have a guest coming who lost her husband a couple years into marriage. We're going to talk about grief. We're going to talk about death. We're going to talk about these hard subjects that a lot of times people don't want to talk about. We'll talk about addiction. Yeah. A lot of things that people don't want to talk about. However, again, this is not going to be a depressing podcast where it's like, oh man, this is a real downer. Like these are the pieces that God redeems, and we're going to celebrate that, and we're not going to brush past the broken pieces, but we're also not going to harp on them. We're going to talk about how God uses those to build us. And so that's what it's for anyone broken. Thank you for joining us. Episode 0 is a wrap. Thank you for being here. Make sure to tune in for episode 1.